Okay, so we'll start with introductions today, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on some COC participation activities that we wanted to present on. We will start with the point-in-time survey update, and we'll get into an analysis of coordinated access data. Then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the recommendations for the emergency solution grant funding that TDHCA has made available recently. I'll give an update on the 2015 COC competition. Then I'll talk about a webinar that will occur next week on permanent supportive housing. After that, we will talk about local homeless coalitions. We'll resume that discussion from last month, and then we'll also talk about the COC board member selection process. And as we get closer to October, this is going to be more and more important. And then we'll talk about next steps in preparing for the August COC board meeting. So I have everyone on mute right now, and I think I'm going to leave everyone on mute for right now, and then I'll unmute you as I need. But as always, use the Go to Webinar widget to ask questions or raise your hand, and I'll unmute you so you can ask the question through your mic or telephone. Okay, so joining us on the line from around the state, we have several folks. I'm not going to go through the list, but we do have, we had about 30, a little over 30 people register. Right now we do have 18 on the line, and I can give you a breakdown of those that registered and where they are in the state. You can see that we have a pretty wide distribution of people in the COC that did register. Some of these are on right now, others are not, but we do have good representation among those that are attending. So I will send this map out after the meeting, and instead of sending the registrants list, I will send a list of attendees so you can see that you are officially attending the meeting. If you are one of the people that are only joining by phone and your name is not listed, make sure to email me afterwards to let me know that you were on the call, and you need to be listed on the attendance sheet. Every month we have about 1 or 2 people that fall into that category, and we want to make sure that you do get your attendance counted. Okay, joining us in the office are 3 other members of THN, and 3 of those are actually 4 other members. I'm sorry. 3 of the 4 are going to be presenting, so I'll let them introduce themselves whenever they present. But those that will be presenting will be Mary Dodson, Sophia Cheka, and Lindsay Marsh, and so you'll hear from them all soon. But also attending from THN is Craig Fierro, and I'll let him say something real quick and mute himself again.
Hi guys, this is Craig. I'm the program assistant here at THN. I just want to remind everybody the best way to stay up to date with all of our updates is to find us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, retweet, repost. We've got Google+. I'm putting all the links right now in the chat box. If you'll look at that green little box, follow those, and you always know what's going on here in the office, even if you can't see us all the time.
All right, thank you very much, Craig. And yes, please utilize those tools to keep up with what we're doing at THN and how we're working with your community as well as other communities around Texas. And this includes the balance of state communities and outside the balance of state continuum of care. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get into the agenda, and we'll get into COC participation. The first thing that we have on the list is an update on our point-in-time survey report, and Lindsay Marsh will be presenting on that. Lindsay, I'm going to unmute you and give you the screen if you're ready. Okay, you should be getting the screen.
Perfect. Okay. Hey everyone, it's Lindsay. I'm just going to briefly go over the balance of state point in time numbers. We had a total of 5,817 surveys. From those surveys, we had a total of 7,596 people. The breakdown there is 6,058 adults and 1,538 kids. So if we break that down into who HUD actually considers to be homeless, then that gives us a different number. We had a total of 4,197 people that HUD considered homeless from the counts that everyone did. What you're looking at right now are some numbers from that HUD total. So you can see here the number of people who indicated they had served in the United States Armed Forces, the number of people who indicated that they had been called up through the reserves or joined the National Guard. And then as we move down, we have family type. Obviously, there's been no change here. This happens every year, where the most family or the highest frequency we have is always going to be with the single individual. And then if we move down, the reasons for homelessness, again, this doesn't change from year to year. It's always unemployment and the inability to pay rent or mortgage, and you can see those numbers highlighted here. So that's a really quick screenshot of what our point in time numbers look like. Everybody should have theirs by now. If you don't, there's a huge problem, but everybody should have gotten those back in probably, I would say, February or March. And the balance of state report will be coming out, and then I'll also do a one-page kind of infographic for that. That's pretty easy to share. And then we'll do the same thing for just Texas in general.
Thank you, Lindsay. So, like Lindsay said, she'll be coming out with a report that's specific to the Texas balance of state that we can share with all of you. And then many of you may not know, but she also compiles data from all of the other COCs throughout Texas to produce a Texas-wide report on the point-in-time data. So we can make that available as soon as she receives all the data from the other COCs. I know she's been gathering that over the past few weeks. So thank you again, Lindsay. And when we do get a final report, she can present on that. So the next thing we have under COC participation is an analysis of the Coordinated Access Program. There was some statistics that Sophia Cheka, who is our Coordinated Access expert, there was some statistics that she shared with me about a month ago that I found really interesting, and we thought about presenting on one of these calls, but we had to wait until this month. So she is going to share the results of some of her early analysis on our pilot projects that are implementing coordinated access. So Sophia, I'm going to hand you the screen and let you present on that. You should be getting the screen. Okay. So I'm sorry, you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. How's my volume? Last time I used this headset, everybody wrote in that I was screaming at them.
You sound great.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you so much, Eric. So as Eric mentioned, I'm going to show everyone some of the data that I've compiled through the first 2 months of coordinated access. I was hoping to be able to do it for Denton, Tyler, and Texarkana, but unfortunately, unfortunately, data analysis takes a long time, so I was only able to compile significant information from Tyler. So just really quickly, what is coordinated access? Coordinated access is systems change with the goal of ending homelessness. It is HUD mandated. HUD has said that individuals that receive both COC program funding as well as Emergency Solutions Grant program funding must participate in the process. But it's really important to keep in mind that we can't end homelessness without everyone at the table, so it's really important to also involve those providers that also do not receive that funding. So again, it's coordinated access at its core is just systems change. I included this on this excerpt from Opening Doors 2015 on the presentation because I think it's a really great argument for why everyone needs to be involved in coordinated access. I'm not going to read it. It is on your slide. You can read it later. I think it's absolutely fabulous, so I encourage all of you to take the time to read through it. And then I'm going to be throwing out a few terms, so just so that I don't need to explain what it is every time. So diversion is this concept that is utilized to help work with clients that present at shelter to try to help them utilize any support networks or resources they have in order to not enter shelter. And it's not that we don't want to help people, it's that emergency shelter and homelessness in general can oftentimes be a traumatic experience, and so we, as much as possible, want to keep people out of the system and we want to keep them housed. It's more cost effective to invest the time to do landlord mediation or conflict resolution than to check people into shelter. And then the other term that I will talk about a little later on is the VI SPDAT, which stands for Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. I've been on this job 2 years. It took me about 1.5 years to learn that. And then FVI SPDAT stands for Family Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization Decision Assistance Tool. And these are tools that were created by E&D Young from Org Code. And it is what providers are using across the country, or what systems are using across the country to prioritize clients for housing resources. So the VI SPDAT contains a variety of questions. They fall into basically 4 categories, and at the end of the assessment it provides you a score, 0 to 20. 20 is the client is the most acute, most likely to die on the streets. 0 is the client is probably higher functioning and needs very limited resources to get back into housing. Okay, so now into the data, if this will let me. Okay, so what I'm going to be showing you is data from one community in Cohort 1. So I've been working with 7 communities during this pilot process for coordinated access. The 3 in Cohort 1 are Denton, Tyler, Texarkana, and they rolled out coordinated access in their communities on May 1st of 2015. I will never forget this date because it is actually my birthday. So what we found in May and June in all the communities. In Denton, in May, they did coordinated access with 2 clients, and in June they did it with 28. You'll see a huge discrepancy potentially between the clients in May and June because we had some data glitches in coordinated access. So for 2 weeks, I had to ask them to not enter clients into HMIS for coordinated access purposes. So I wanted to address that huge discrepancy between 2 clients and 28. In Tyler, we saw 15 assessments being completed in May and 53 in June. Again, a really huge dramatic jump. And then in Texarkana in May, they had 41 assessments and 33 in June. So I really love looking at residents prior to program entry data because I think it's really telling to know where clients are coming from when they present to shelter. So what you see here are the number of people who responded to each of the residents prior to program entry. So another way of explaining that. So this dark maroon color that has a 4 next to it, what the legend is telling me is that that represents staying or living in a friend's room, apartment, or house. So 4 out of the 15 clients that were assessed in May were staying or living in a friend's room, apartment, or house prior to entering shelter, prior to doing coordinated access and prior to entering shelter in Tyler. What I did is I took this a step further to show the breakdown between those individuals exiting public institution, those who are currently homeless, and those who I am categorizing as at risk. These clients are those who were housed either in a doubled up situation or in their own rental or owned property prior to entering shelter. So that's why I call them at risk. They're not necessarily already homeless, but when they presented the night before, they had housing. So what this is showing me is that 9 out of the 15 people, or 64%, came from housing. And so when we were at the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference last year, they talked a lot about using this data to make an argument for why diversion needs to be utilized at your front doors, at your emergency shelters. And so what this is telling me is that there were 9 people that we could have potentially diverted, therefore clearing up more beds for those people who are more acute in our system. This data shows June 2015, so again, we were assessing more people. I believe this was the month where they assessed 53 people, so here you're going to see the spread of all the different locations people presented to shelter from. And again, it's a really high percentage of people that were coming from either doubled up or their own rental or owned property. So again, it seems like Tyler is a great place to do diversion at your emergency shelters. Another advantage of diversion is it's much more cost effective than a lot of the interventions out there right now. Another thing this is showing me is that there will be a time down the line where we are going to try to reach out to public institutions such as jails, such as hospitals, to have them do more discharge planning with housing involved. We do not want to see anybody exiting any public institution ending up on the street. So again, with diversion, in May 2015, 14 people went down the diversion track in coordinated access. What I mean by that is that these were clients who were not homeless, who were coming from a house situation. So that's 93% of the people that were assessed in Tyler for coordinated access. At the end of diversion, 100% of those people had no alternative to shelter. So what that means is that we were not able to identify either a friend's house, a family member's house, their own housing for them to return to. So 100% of those people ended up in shelter. For June 2015, we see very similar numbers. 43% of people we did diversion with 43 people, 80% of the total people assessed, and once again, 100% had no alternative to shelter. So that means that those 43 people went into shelter at the end of that assessment. With the VI SPDAT, so in Tyler, in May, they did 1 assessment. In June, they did 7. And then the breakdown for that assessment is below. In May 2015, with the 1 VI SPDAT that they completed, that client scored a 5. So what that means is that 5 is the ideal housing intervention for that client. So if we could connect this individual with rapid rehousing, chances are we could end their homeless crisis and potentially provide some housing stability for the client. In June 2015, there were 7 VI SPDATs completed. There should have been 11. We were missing 4, which for me, that's a note to talk with assessors to figure out kind of what's going on. And the average score was a 3. So what this means is that we can utilize minimal community resources or minimal interventions to get those individuals out of the homeless service system. And then the last slide, or sorry, this is the second to last slide. So this is kind of a summary of the data that is gathered in the VI SPDAT. So this is kind of the interesting breakdown that I wanted to show. The length of time homeless range from 1 month to 7 years, with the average being 2 years. I also saw that the clients are not frequent users of the system. I tried looking for a definition of frequent users of the system. It seems that it ranges. So there's some think tanks that say that if a client engages with a system 4 times in a year, that they're frequent users. Others, it's 7 or more times. 7 or more involvements with the emergency room, for example, would constitute them being a frequent user. So what I saw here is that clients are not frequent users. So 2 people used the ER 5 times in the last year. I believe the split was 1 person went 3 times, the other went 2. 2 people encountered police 3 times in the last month. Again, 1 person encountered police twice, the other just once. And then 2 people used crisis services 2 times in the last 6 months. And then when it comes to the breakdown for kind of health conditions, 1 person has experienced heat stroke, which, as you all know, it's very hot outside. It's a very serious concern for our homeless neighbors. And another has heart disease. So this is also showing that we don't necessarily have clients with very high medical needs. So that's the data. I also wanted to encourage you guys to check out this webinar. I'll add the date to send to Eric once I edit this PowerPoint and before I send it to Eric. It's on August 26th of 2015, so next month, and it's all about coordinated entry and systems change. And I really encourage, if you haven't started talking about coordinated access in your or coordinated entry in your communities, that you check this out. I think it'll provide really good introductory education about what coordinated entry and systems change is. And that's it.
And Sophia, I wanted to say that I actually sent the invitation out just now to everyone who is on the COC membership list. So you can go ahead and sign up. But I was hoping that you could go back to that first pie chart. I just wanted to say something before we take it off.
This one? Okay.
It wasn't that one. I'm sorry. It was the one where you talked about those who could have been diverted. That's it, right there. So this is only 15 clients that we're talking about. But if you think about if these statistics would hold true for every 15 clients you saw, think about how this could affect, if you really engaged in diversion, how this could affect how you operate at your shelter or transitional housing program. You would have more time to work with fewer clients if you were able to divert more folks away from shelter and have them opt out of the program. Now, of course, you're going to have to make sure you identify the resources and the people that can help divert them. But if you just have more of an emphasis on diversion, it could make your work in your shelters and supportive housing easier and then allow you to have greater outcomes. And that's really, I think, the beauty of diversion. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, yes, I think that's an excellent point to make. And I also think it's important to note that the data looked relatively similar for 2 months. So I'm also really interested to see how it'll look over the course of 6 months or over the course of the year, because I think that's where the really robust argument for investing in diversion and really doing diversion will be. So yes, thank you for that, Eric.
All right. Well, thank you. And I'm going to take the screen back. And before I move on, I want to just make sure that we can be heard. I actually have one person write in and say they were having a hard time hearing our broadcast. Can someone write in and let me know if we are coming through okay? Okay, thanks, Gerald, and well, now many others. It sounds like we are coming through okay to most of you, so I'm hoping that you're back up and running, Ms. Garcia. So we'll go ahead and go back to the agenda and go to the next thing on the list. So the next thing we had in the original agenda we sent you, we had an update on the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference. I was going to give just a really quick update about what we learned last week in DC and what the takeaways were from that. And maybe there will be a good time to do that at another point. But I think more time sensitive is information we received from TDHCA regarding recommendations for the Emergency Solution Grant funding. So I want to go ahead and talk about that just a little bit. Let me pull up that information. Okay, so we sent out a notice, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, about the recommendations that TDHCA staff brought to their board in regard to the Emergency Solution Grant funding for the fiscal year 2016. So this is their recommendation on funding for programs that applied for this ESG on the statewide level earlier this year. So I think a lot of you probably have seen this, but this is a presentation or a pulled out presentation of what was in those recommendations. We had in that documentation we sent you, I believe it had information on all areas of Texas, but we focused just here on the balance of state. And you can see that we had 10 projects that were recommended for funding, and that was presented to the board. And what this means is that if they received, and they being TDHCA, Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, if they receive the amount of money from HUD that they think they will for Emergency Solution Grant funding, this is how they will award funding to these agencies. Now, some of these agencies are collaborative applicants, so some of them may include other agencies under the primary applicant, but there were 10 that were recommended for funding. And you can see that total is $3.4 million. Unfortunately, there were 11 others that were not recommended for funding, and those are on the list below the dark line there. What we need to start thinking about as a COC is how we might want to handle this competition in the future, and how we might want to spread out the money differently, because our COC may have the opportunity to decide that. TDHCA is working with COC lead agencies on the possibility of those COC lead agencies managing this ESG award competition, or this ESG competition, and maybe even managing the monitoring of those sub-grants. So as we learn more from TDHCA staff on their progress towards that goal, we'll be working with you, our COC members, to identify the best way to handle something like this, handle a competition like this. Now, I think we might have a question about this. We do have someone who has raised their hand. I'm going to find that person and I'll unmute you. Well, I thought we did. You can type in your questions if you have them. I'm assuming someone has a question about this. Sorry, I guess no one has raised their hand. So type in any questions you might have about these ESG award recommendations. We will send this out after the webinar, so you can view this again if you haven't, or view this for the first time if you haven't received the first notice of this.
Eric, this is Mary. I just want to remind people, because I've gotten a couple of emails from folks who had some questions about this. As Eric said, with this process for state ESG this year, we as the COC lead agency didn't have any role in deciding anything about the competition. This was all TDHCA's process, and they're the ones who did all the reviews and all the scoring and all the recommendations. And I know that they have certain amounts of money allocated to certain COCs based on a formula. And so what it just means, I'm guessing, is that those top 10 agencies that have in fact been recommended for funding, those were the top score earners that fit within the funding cap for balance of state. So if there had been, for example, more money for ESG in the state level, then some of those that are in the orange rather than the green would likely have also been recommended for an award. So unfortunately, there just wasn't enough money for everyone in the BOS to get some. So that's what the green and the orange mean. But if you have any questions about that, TDHCA folks would be the ones to ask.
Thank you for that clarification, Mary. Yes, and TDHCA is still handling the competition, so I'm sorry if I was confusing things there. So yeah, if you have any questions about the scoring, you'll have to contact TDHCA. We'll try to help out as much as we can with that communication if you ask us. But for now, we'll send you the recommendations as TDHCA has presented them. So let me go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda. So yesterday I sent out a webinar invite on a presentation about creating permanent supportive housing. And I wanted to make sure that everyone, at least on this call, understood what that was for. Here is the invite. Because the reason I wanted to make sure everyone understood what this was for is because there was something else sent out earlier that day from us about a very similar training. This webinar that's happening next Wednesday is focused specifically on putting together a permanent supportive housing bonus project for funding in the Texas balance of state. So it's very specific to the permanent supportive housing bonus project opportunity and specific to the Texas balance of state. Now we have strategic funding group presenting on this. They will also be the group that works with a few agencies after the webinar on putting together an application to submit to the Texas balance of state. And hopefully we will get some really high quality applications that we can present to our prioritization committee so they can choose the best of that group to submit to HUD for a permanent supportive housing project. We really need to try to take advantage of this funding. This potentially could be the only new funding available for HUD COC competition funding this year. So are there any questions about that? This is specific to the permanent supportive housing bonus project funding and to the balance of state. Any other questions about that? Okay, no one's typing in, so I'm hoping not. But if you need to, you can contact us about this after the call. But attend the meeting, attend the webinar if you are considering applying at all, because that is something that's required of potential applicants. Okay, if there are no questions about that, I will move on to the next item on the agenda, and that item is about local homeless coalitions, and Mary is going to lead that discussion.
Hey, Eric, this is Mary. Did you go over the agenda item D, update on the COC competition?
Oh, I'm sorry, I passed right over that, and that's a pretty big thing. Thank you. I'm sorry, everyone. Yes, let me give you a quick update on that. I'm going to pull up the RFP. So last week we were in DC, and on the plane up there we received an email from HUD and the U.S. Interagency Council for the Homeless that said that the 2015 COC competition would be open within the next 2 weeks. So we don't know exactly when that COC competition will be made available by HUD, but I'm guessing that it's going to be either in late July or early August. So for the third time, I have updated our timeline on our request for proposal form. So let me go to that and you can see what that says now. Oh, I'm sorry, I have the wrong form up. Let me pull that right form up. So while I'm looking for that, let me say that I'm still basing our timeline on a 90-day turnaround. I'm hoping that HUD will give us that amount of time. And I'm basing it on our desire to give you as much time as possible to complete your project applications. So here is the updated timeline. So now this has not been confirmed by HUD, but I made a few assumptions and I updated our timeline based on those. So I'm assuming that the grant will be made available on August 3rd, so very soon. And everything on the timeline that follows that is based on that date. So you can see that we will make sure everyone knows that the funding has been announced, the funding opportunity has been announced. We will update our RFP and put that on the website and make sure everyone is sent that. Then we will give you 1 month to complete your project application. And I've said this many times in the past, but during that month, if you are one of the renewal project applicants or a new project applicant, we will work with you if we have time and if we're able to get that project application done. So we want to try to help you out as much as we can, but you do need to read the HUD guidance and rely on that first, because we are not able to help out the large numbers of people that need help every year, or we're not able to give them the time that everyone wants, but we'll do our best. After that, those submissions are turned in, we will review everything for threshold. Then we'll let you know whether or not your grant's made threshold, and then we'll go through the prioritization process, and your grants will be reviewed and ranked. So we will finish that process up with a presentation to the COC board on those rankings, and we'll vote on approving those rankings before we submit everything to HUD. So there is an updated timeline, and that's already on our website. We will send that out to you after this webinar is complete. But as soon as we know the details and HUD releases the grant, we'll give that final update and make sure you know what all the deadlines are so you can start working on everything if you haven't already. And I would encourage you to work on what you can already if you do have especially if you have a renewal COC application. Any questions about that? And thank you, Mary. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions about that. Let me go back to the agenda. And sorry, y'all, for skipping D, but now we have completed D and E, so we will go to part 3 of our agenda on local homeless coalitions. So now I will hand it off to you, Mary.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Whoops, let me get some of this extraneous information off here. You'll see I've posted on my screen the latest Local Homeless Coalition map. Some of our volunteers and Craig, our program assistant, and I have been working on contacting groups in the communities that we had as at any point in time in the past on any of our maps as a local homeless coalition. So we think this is the most recent up to date, but certainly if you all have not been contacted or you see that your county is not colored, then we don't know that you're operating as a local homeless coalition, so please tell us. The grayed out counties are non-balance of state counties, so in this map we just grayed them out because they don't apply to us, but every other color represents a local homeless coalition. So you'll see we've got some great coverage in most of the parts of this balance of state. Southwestern portion, however, is an area that we're going to hopefully work on getting more people involved and operating a coalition. But right now, those coalitions that are on the map are the ones that we have listed. And the reason that's important right now is because at the October meeting, the general membership meeting on October 14th, that we'll be holding in conjunction with the THN conference on ending homelessness. That will be our second general membership meeting of the year. So it's not only a COC board member meeting, to which every member is also invited, but this one is specifically an effort to get every member possible to participate in the meeting, either in Corpus Christi in person if you're attending the conference, or by webinar or phone. So we'll have the same kind of setup for people to participate even if you can't attend the conference in Corpus. But the local homeless coalitions are the ones that will be able to elect a representative from their coalition to serve on what we call the representative planning group, which is one of the main groups that does conversation and discussion and recommends items for a vote to the board under our new structure that was just approved. So I also have contact information for all of the local homeless coalitions that you all have confirmed with us. So we will be contacting you for sure with more instructions about how to select your coalition's representative. And in last month's meeting in June, the board did in fact approve a description of local homeless coalitions for the COC. So you'll see here the balance of state requirements for local homeless coalitions are highlighted in yellow, and local homeless coalitions must meet all those requirements in yellow in order to have a representative. So you have your coalition now. If you agree to follow all of the items in yellow, your local homeless coalition can then have a representative, and so you'll have a very direct voice in the COC, even if you don't have a COC board member from your local area. And so just kind of a little recap here, anything that's not in yellow is a suggestion from THN staff and other items that would make for good governance and operation of a local homeless coalition. So you're welcome to use those or not, but anything in yellow, we will be making sure that your LHC is doing throughout the year in order to stay in good standing as a local homeless coalition and maintain your representative on the planning group part of the COC. Right. So we voted on all of these last time. If you have any questions about what's in yellow, certainly let me know. And again, we will be sending more information about a process of what we need on our end as the lead agency from you as a coalition from selecting your representative. In general, we have said that coalitions can use whatever selection process they want, but we just want to know what that process is, and then obviously we want to know who that person is so we can make sure and get that group going. So ideally, by the end of September, you would have had your representative chosen, and Their terms will start on October 1st, knowing also that the COC board members will be elected at the general member meeting on October 14th. I know there's a lot of meetings and dates that we're talking about, but for local homeless coalitions, you'll need to choose your representative to the representative planning group by the end of September. And I am also willing to draft a job description for a representative planning group representative if you all think that would be helpful. Just let me know. And I think that's all on local homeless coalitions that I had.
So Mary, we had a few questions and comments come in.
Okay.
So could you start with showing the map again?
Yes. I realize that's not every single part of the BOS, but that's as much as I can get on the screen without
Right.
it being microscopic.
It is way too big. There were some people that wanted to make sure that they saw their locations. I think you did scroll through everything, but I wanted to make sure that everyone knew after this meeting, we will put this in a PDF format, so in a way that you can see the entire map, and we'll send that out to you. So that was one of the questions that came in. Someone wanted to make sure they saw the location where they serve people. We also had a question from Kelly Stallings, and I think you might have already answered it, but she asked if there would be a timeline to achieve these yellow sections if coalitions are not already doing these things. And I believe you answered it when you were talking about all of the meetings that are coming up, but do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Well, specifically meeting the items in yellow in terms of a timeline of that we're going to make sure those requirements are done. I would say, Eric, you and I haven't talked about this, but off the top of my head, I would say maybe within 6 months. Kelly, do you want to write back in, or Eric, you want to unmute her and see if she wants to discuss like what might be a realistic time frame? What we don't want to do is have people think the requirements are too onerous and wouldn't be able to be implemented very quickly. We think that the requirements were pretty general. Things like you need to have a meeting at least quarterly, you need to take attendance and keep minutes, that you're hopefully already doing. Plan and coordinate a housing and service system that incorporates BOS COC goals. Many of you do already have a plan. If not, that might be a good one for you guys to give feedback to us on what a time frame would be. Conduct an annual point in time count and a housing inventory update. Again, many of you hopefully are already doing that. Review the performance of your projects, particularly those, or the only part of that we require is that the LHC help to ensure that all the projects in their coverage area that are required to use the Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, that they are in fact using it. We do that too as the lead agency for HMIS, but your awareness of that and help with that on the local level is a good practice. But I do like the idea of setting target dates by which all of this will kick in and we expect you to be operating. So I will draft something for all of your review.
Sure. We will definitely work on it. And also, Kelly, if you wanted to say anything, I did unmute you. Otherwise, you can keep yourself muted on your end. She's okay.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
think 6 months sounds doable.
Okay.
6 months sounds doable to me.
Great. Yeah, and we know everybody's, just starting with this new description, and so please send us your feedback on how it's going, or also what's helpful is if you can tell us specific activities that you did within your local homeless coalition or within your community to make these items happen. That can really be helpful for other LHCs, and we like to know about what's working in certain areas so that when we receive a question from another area, they say, hey, do you have any ideas on this particular topic? Then we sort of have a bank of information from other folks that are already working on that in their own communities, and we can at least send contact information so that you all can talk with each other about what's working.
Great. Do we have any other questions? You can type those in if you do. The only other thing, Mary, that was pointed out by several people is that they would love to have hard copies of this, of what you've just shown. So we will definitely send out copies after this webinar to everyone. And we will make many of these resources available on our website, if not all of them.
Great. Okay.
Eric or Mary, I'm not sure if you answered it already, but Kelly Stallings had a question. Will there be a timeline to achieve the yellow sections if coalitions are not already doing these things?
Yeah, so I think we answered that. I'm hoping that the 6-month timeline will work, but Mary and I will work on specific target dates for specific sections. So, and we'll work with the membership on that.
Yes, we are also creating this as we go. We don't have the luxury of working on only one thing over here, just like you guys don't. And so thanks for being patient with us as we work to get all these systems and activities set up and in place so that you can meet the requirements. And continue to send us your ideas.
And there actually was another question that came in. It's a very good question from Linda Hamlin. And what she asked is, can I conclude from this that unless we participate in coordinated access, we cannot be represented in the RPG?
No, that is not the case.
Thank you.
Here, I'm guessing she's talking about the part here, coordinated access transition team.
Yes.
For those communities, well, obviously you can't participate in that until we've gotten coordinated access going in your community. So if you do have coordinated access operating in your community already, then yes, your coalition should have a coordinated access transition team or CAT. But if we haven't rolled out coordinated access, then you don't need to necessarily have a coordinated access transition team in place yet. So I don't know if I got the crux of the question.
Well, I think you answered it, but I would like to add that we are intending to roll out coordinated access across the balance of state, and we are expecting our communities to participate in that. In fact, we're certainly going to hold those with COC funding and emergency solution grant funding, as well as other funding, accountable. That's going to be one of the things that they're accountable to. They're going to have to participate in coordinated access because we're held accountable by HUD for implementation of coordinated access. And more importantly, we're seeing that it works. And so we are definitely going to hold our communities accountable for that. But obviously, if we haven't gone to your community and conducted implementation trainings, we're not going to penalize you for not doing that yet.
Right. So just as a follow along to that, Sophia spoke earlier and gave us some data from Tyler. We have rolled out coordinated access in 7 pilot communities now. So if your community isn't one of those 7 pilots, then we haven't reached you yet. But Sophia is writing a toolkit that we will work with you to implement in your community so that you can get coordinated access going. And as Eric said, meet the HUD requirement and improve your system and end homelessness more quickly and efficiently and effectively, because that is the goal of coordinated access.
And believe it or not, we actually have more questions. This is great. We like getting questions. So, but I think this might be it.
Yes, I love getting questions.
So this is regarding the map again. So Melody Alexander asked, why are there so many white sections of the map? And who's representing those areas. And so I think I can speak to that. So it's not as if there is nothing going on in those areas. Definitely there's work being done in homelessness in many of those areas that are not filled in with a color and labeled with a coalition. But those areas, at least for now, have not indicated to us that they have established local homeless coalitions. I personally have met with groups in several of these counties, and at one time or another, they did have homeless coalitions. But this is the way it looks right now. This is our landscape right now on the Texas balance of state. So we're hoping that there are fewer and fewer unfilled counties in the future, and we would love to work with the community on forming a coalition if that needs to be done. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so I think that might be the end of the questions and comments for now. So we can, unless you have something else, Mary, with local homeless coalitions, we can move to the next section on the agenda. And I won't even bring the screen back to me since you are actually doing the next section. But the next section is on COC board member selection. And this, let me remind everybody that this is the item. At the end of this, we hope to take a vote on our board member selection plan. And I have already made sure we have the governance committee members in attendance that we need. We have the numbers that we need.
All right. So thanks to those of you who completed the survey that we sent to try to solicit feedback and input into this document. We asked 4 specific questions in our brief survey, WUFU survey, because we thought those were the most critical pieces that we wanted to make sure we had gotten member feedback on before finalizing this proposal for a vote today. You saw a draft of this policy and procedure for selection of COC board members at the June meeting. And again, we sent the survey a couple of weeks ago, and we got 56 responses. So thank you all for that involvement and giving us your ideas. Let me just see here. The results of this survey I've kind of spelled out within this document you're seeing on your screen. The letters in green were informed by the survey. Letters in black are ones that we have currently in the governance charter. Letters in blue are everything that we're adding or is up for proposal to be added language in this board member selection policies and procedures. And this is one of the requirements of the COC interim rule that COCs must have selected a board. So this is our second policy and procedure as a COC. It's very exciting for those of you who are into that kind of thing like I am. We're getting very organized and transparent. So for the vote today, again, black is what's already in the governance charter. Blue is the proposed language to add to flesh out what's already in the charter, and green letters were specifically the items that you all answered to in the survey. So you'll see in general, the policy says that the COC board is the primary decision-making body for the balance of state continuum of care. The board members determine the policy direction and ensure that the COC fulfills its responsibilities as assigned by HUD, and they oversee and approve the work of all the committees and work groups. So we will follow a written process to select COC board members to act on behalf of the COC, and we will review, update, and approve that process at least once every 5 years. That is, although it's in blue, that is in fact another requirement within the interim rule. In the proposal last month, we had a breakdown saying that the board will consist of 11 members, but again, based on your feedback in the survey, we did confirm, you'll see this right here, that the majority of people who voted, 96% of you, agreed that certain seats should be designated. So rather than sort of open at-large seats, you agreed with the idea of having certain seats designated so that we make sure to represent certain stakeholder groups. And the second question in this survey related to what that breakdown would look like. And the option that was chosen by a narrower margin, 57% of people voted for this breakdown, where seats 1 through 5 will be filled by a representative planning group member. So again, the representative planning group is that larger body of folks that is one representative from every local homeless coalition. So your representative planning group member from your coalition could also serve on the COC board. 5 people from that RPG group, which right now is, I think we have about 23 homeless coalitions, so the RPG would be about 23 people. 5 of those will also be elected to serve on the COC board, the official decision-making body. The 6th seat is designated for a person with lived experience, that is someone who is currently or formerly homeless. And then seats 7 through 11 are designated for other stakeholder groups, victim services, veterans, health, children and youth, and business or local government. And thank you all for voting that. The other option that did not get a majority vote, it was 43% chose the other option, which had every single seat designated for a specific subpopulation. So this is what we're going to be voting on today. And of course, the charter and the policies and procedures can be updated at any time. But if approved today, this will be our breakdown. And what that means is then in preparation for the election, which again will happen on October 14th, we will accept nominations by a specific seat. So anyone interested in serving on the COC board, for example, to represent veterans, would be applying to, or nominating themselves to be elected to seat 8, which is the veterans seat. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Then we get into other language that is required by the COC interim rule. The fact that the board members will comply with a code of conduct and with conflict of interest requirements and a recusal process. Again, so that we want to make sure the board, if a conflict of interest exists, for example, someone who's a member of the board is also representing an agency that gets continuum of care funding, then if a vote comes to the COC board that relates to continuum of care funding for that specific agency or for a group of agencies, then that person might have a conflict of interest with that vote and would therefore recuse themselves from that vote or not participate in that vote. Again, the whole point is to be as transparent as possible. And also just another note, some seats here are designated. Seats 1 through 5, in addition to being a representative planning group member, not every seat has to be filled by a service provider. If you have, for example, someone in your community that is with a school district and is very active and involved with youth homelessness and family homelessness and children and education, they wouldn't necessarily be a homeless services provider, but they might be an excellent RPG member to be a representative on the board, or a representative in seat 10 for homeless children and youth. So we want to make sure that you're working to find people in your communities that you would like to serve and represent the issue area on our COC decision-making body, which is the board.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think when we saw these results, at least when I saw the results, what I thought was the people who participated in the survey really wanted us to have some flexibility with this RPG group, and that's why this option was chosen. And I think that actually will make it a little easier for our COC to populate this group.
Great. And in fact, I just received an email this morning with somebody who said, how do we nominate someone to be a COC board member? Because I've got someone in my community who's very interested. To which I said, yay! So we've already got notice of our first interested nominee. And so what we'll be doing if this process is approved today, we at THN will create all the paperwork and the nomination forms and things like that, ballots, so that everything will be ready for the official election process in October. All right, so goodness, I realized I must have been hitting keys there. So, and then a little bit about the terms. Ideally, they will start October 1st and end September 30th. However, this year, because our general meeting is October 14th, obviously the terms will start October 14th. Then we get into a list of the duties that the board will execute. And again, these are all just things that are required by the interim rule, fleshed out a little bit by us looking at other COCs, policies and procedures for board selection. So I wasn't planning to go through that piece by piece, but if there is something on here that you'd like me to go into more detail about, I can do that. You know, it's really just kind of overseeing everything that we are required to do in terms of creating a plan, making sure that we're coordinating with Emergency Solutions Grant, making sure that we have an open and fair competition process for COC program funding, maintaining COC policies and procedures. Then we get into some minimum requirements, and we tried to make them very general so that many people could meet them. So as a board member, we would require, and we're proposing in this process, that board members must commit to attend at least 75% of the regularly scheduled COC board meetings in a calendar year. And again, that they must disclose potential conflicts of interest and, whoops, not sing, sign a conflict of interest statement annually, and that they must recuse themselves from voting on a matter where there is a conflict. So, you know, pretty broad requirements, and a lot of people would be able to meet those. Terms of office, again, we're looking at staggered terms of every 2 years, so that every year half of the positions would stand for election, not every position, just for continuity's sake. So this process proposes that in these upcoming elections, the odd-numbered seats will start 2-year terms, and the even-numbered seats will start 1-year terms. And then the process itself, RPG members, again, will be seats 1 through 5 on the COC board. And here was the last item that you could vote on in the survey. Oh, no, sorry, this is item number 3. 93% of the respondents said that they agreed that RPG members for the upcoming year will be selected by the COC board members of the current year. So that, in essence, for this first year, means that the governance committee, which is currently serving as a COC board, they will select the RPG members for the upcoming year. And in future years, the current board will elect them for the upcoming year. Other members, seats 6 through 11, we go into a little bit more of the details about that they will be elected at the fall general membership meeting of every year, and that THN staff will facilitate the nomination process and the election process. And we have written in here too to make sure it's clear that people will be able to vote by attending the meeting either in person or via webinar, and we'll have balloting available in both methods. So even if you're not able to attend in person, you can still have a vote. Meetings, basically it says that the board will meet regularly, they'll have agendas, they'll have minutes that will be recorded and posted, they'll meet monthly, and then this was the fourth survey question. We had proposed in this process that RPG meetings would be the place where topics are fully discussed, kind of like what we're doing now in the COC board meetings that we've been having, so that's where a lot of the discussion happens, and that's where we have really broad representation, one person at least from every local homeless coalition. And then the COC board meetings will change to become something more of where they are playing more of that oversight and policy direction role, and so they will be voting, primarily voting on items proposed by the RPG. So we thought that was a significant change to point out, and I'm glad to say 89% of you agreed that that is the way we should do it. So that's why we put that one in there in this process for the vote today. So that is it, the extent of our policy and procedure related to board member selection process.
So thank you, Mary. So now I need to ask if there are any comments or questions. I know I've seen one question come in already, so I'll ask you in just a second. I'll ask you, Mary, in just a second. But please take your time to send in any comments you have or questions about this before we do call for a vote. And I'll just remind everybody that we have sent this out, and this has been presented last month. And it's been on our website, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, and hopefully you participate in the survey. I think that's the most useful way you could have given your input, or the most effective way to give your input on this. The question that has come in, and there might be more, is from Carol Gresham, and she asked, how will we handle, or will we allow a person to serve consecutive terms? And is there language to that in this policy and procedure?
There is not language currently in there, but we could certainly add that if people would like us to do that, either for the vote today or for some time in the future. We haven't asked a survey question about that. I'm not sure if that's something we would want to, or if people feel comfortable right now adding something in before the vote is taken.
Yes, I would just like to ask if what people think. What I would tend to think is that we would allow that possibility, but that we would keep the terms the same. So if someone were voted in to the RPG or voted into the board for that 1 year cycle, they could be up for nomination in that second year, a consecutive year. But please write in and tell me what you think, or ask me to unmute you and tell us what you think. So I'm not hearing anything yet, or I'm not seeing anything, but we can include that language if that would be okay with everyone. I know that many boards do have that language in their PNPs. But go ahead, Mary.
Well, I was just going to say, I think a pretty common note on that item that I've seen in other charters is something to the effect that a person can serve 2 consecutive terms, but then they would need to not serve a term after that. So not 3 consecutive terms, but only 2, and then they would not serve 1, but then they would be sort of re-eligible to serve again after sitting out 1 term.
Okay, and that would actually accommodate the 2 comments that have come in. We had one from Melody Alexander, who says she prefers to have new people with fresh ideas serve, which is a good point. But then Carol Gresham also points out that they should be allowed to serve consecutively because it's difficult to get volunteers to do this. But if we were to allow consecutive terms for 2 terms and then take a term off, I'm hoping that that would accommodate or resolve some of the concerns. But please write in if you have those.
Yeah, I'm not even sure exactly how to phrase that. I wonder if perhaps we could have the vote with this concept as I wrote it on the screen now, and then maybe finalize specific language that certainly has that same intent.
That would actually be fine with me if that's fine with those in attendance. We do have one other comment that came in from Bobby Ehrig, and he says he thinks for the sake of commonality that terms should always be 2 years at a time. We're trying to do this in this fashion, you will have listed, will confuse people and could turn off participation. Okay. So the reason we have staggered terms is to allow for the vote each year by those who are still on the RPG. So I guess I just want to ask if there are any problems if we vote on the plan right now with the policy that Mary had suggested, where 2 consecutive terms of office would be allowed, but then a term off would be required if 2 are served consecutively.
I want to clarify in response to Bobby's question. Every term is 2 years. It's just that for this first year, since we're getting started, the even numbered seats will start with a 1-year term. But every term besides that and after that will in fact be a 2-year term. We just had to choose a starting point so that we wouldn't have the entire board turning over 2 years from now. So besides seats 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 in this first year, every other term on the COC board will be 2 years. I was wondering if that might be part of the confusion.
Yeah, hopefully that helps. Okay, Bob. Yes, Bobby said that.
So it's kind of just a getting started.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. He said that helps. So, and Kelly offers up the suggestion, Kelly Stallings, I'm sorry, offers up the suggestion that we could start with 2 and some 3 the first time and go all to 2-year terms so they stay staggered. I think the way you just explained it will resolve those concerns about the 2-year and 1 year, because that's just at the start. Mary's right. After that, everyone's 2 years. It's just when they go off has to be staggered.
Right.
So I think that's all cleared up. Bahia Nightingale, she also writes in, and from what she's writing, it looks like everything has been resolved. So thank you for clearing that out, Mary. So I'm going to ask one more time if there are any issues with voting with the addendum that Mary has just suggested. If there are not, then I'm going to recommend a vote. But I will give you a little bit of time to write in or raise your hand. Okay, I am not. Okay, so there was one. Okay, before we take the vote, we actually have a question that came in. Bahia Nightingale asked if there's a process being established for removing a board member. Do we have that listed in this plan?
We do not have that listed in here right now, but we could certainly add that. I know there are some charters and policies and procedures that do have language to that effect that speak to not only sort of terminating someone's term, but also just for the option if someone can no longer fulfill their term, say they're moving or they got a different job or something. So she's right that we do not have that in there right now, but we could certainly add that for maybe for a future vote, because I think I could not propose that language in
Right.
1 minute like I did with the other thing, but that would be a really great addition to the policy and procedure.
Okay. Yes, we will definitely propose that for a future vote. So I think that will resolve his concern. And this is why we present these things to you, the membership, because we do need your input, and you're going to think of things that we have not thought about. So thank you for all the input on this. Okay, so are there any other concerns? I don't want to have any concerns remaining out there before we vote on what we have been presented. Okay. I'm not getting anyone writing in. If you were all in person, I could see your faces and see your displeasure if you were showing that, but that's why you have to write in, and thank you for those who have written in your concerns. So what I will do is recommend for my fellow governance committee members that we vote to approve the selection of board member policy and procedure as presented with the addendum that Mary suggested earlier about consecutive terms, and with the promise to develop language on removing a board member. So I'm going to start unmuting those who are on the governance committee so they can take a vote. So I'll go down the list. Carol Gresham, how do
Yes,
you vote?
I vote to approve.
Okay, thank you, Carol. And I think Jennifer may still be with us. Jennifer Laurent, are you able to vote? Jennifer may have had, I think
Eric,
she,
she stepped away from her call, but she already voted.
oh, okay, did she write in and
Yeah,
vote?
it's in the question. She had to step away for a phone call.
Thank you, Craig. Jennifer works in a very busy shelter, so she's probably putting out a fire. Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm seeing if we have anyone else on the call. Sorry, I thought we had one other person, but I think that might be it. That, including my vote, which is yes, that would be enough to approve this as presented. So thank you for everyone who's on the governance committee voting on this. And thank you, Mary, for presenting this. And thank you all for the questions. But we have voted to approve this as presented with the amendment we discussed and the promise to outline the procedure for removing a board member. Any other questions or comments before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move the screen back to me. Thank you, Mary. All right, so that was the last items before we talked about next steps. So as we prepare for the August board meeting, I need to let you know that one of the things we'll be working on is something we talked about earlier. We're going to work on a method of nominating officers for our meeting in Corpus Christi, and we're going to present that to you. We hope to present a draft of that process for your review. Preferably, we would produce that before the meeting and we can send it to you, but we'll do that as we can. But I think Mary may have already started thinking about how to do this. As you can tell, she's very good at putting together these policies and procedures. So, Mary, you have anything to add to that? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, not right now.
Yeah. So,
Nothing to add right now.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but we will have a draft for you to review as well as other topics, of course, that will be important for us to present to you. And probably by then, I'm assuming by then, we'll have some more information about the 2015 Continuum of Care competition, because I'm assuming it will be open by then. So as always, we'll send you information from these meetings, and everything that was presented at this meeting will be sent to you in electronic form, and we will post much of that on our website. This webinar will also be, a recording of this webinar will also be posted on our website. So look for that and pass that along to your coalition members. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and close out the meeting. I will stick around if there are questions that you need to ask me, but thank you all for attending, and I'll call an end to the July COC board meeting for the Texas Balance of State. Thank you all.